Hey guys, Nigel McCollum, health and wellness coach here again, and today I'm talking and discussing about fear and panic and the stimuluses behind that. What basically makes us react to various stimuli and stimulus in our environments. And I've read quite a few books over the years on these subjects, and most notably the book by Scott Carney called What Doesn't Kill Us, and his more recent book called The Wedge. I've also explored evolutionary biology as well, and more recently as well, the Stephen W. Porges, the polyvagal theory as well. So the thing that fascinates me is, from a cold water point of view as well, is if you're experiencing your first ever trip into the cold water, so ice cold water, then I see this quite regularly when people expose themselves into the cold water, that their initial reaction is usually a deep breath in. It's panic, it's fear, and it's got to get themselves out of that cold water ASAP as quickly as they possibly can, because their body has registered this as a potential risk, as a potential fear, and the body will become to harm. So what's actually going on in that environment? What's actually going on in that situation there? That's what interests me. And as breath workers, we see this quite a lot when we would guide a breathwork session. We will regularly see beginners going into their breath holds where we've fully exhaled and we're starting to hold our breath into what's called kumbhaka. And if you are not familiar with breathwork and you've never been in that breath holding phase before, and this is your first experience of breathwork, then it's a very similar reaction as to what you would experience if it was your first time in the cold water. And again, that is potentially fear and panic. And in the cold water, the reaction is deep breath, it's trying to get out of the water, and what is actually happening there? So this is the part that I like. This is the limbic system. This is the reptilian brain, or the lizard brain, that is dealing with survival, and it always wants to preserve you. It'll get you into a fight, but then once that fight comes, it'll self-preserve and it'll get you out there as quick as it possibly can. So let's look at the limbic system as basically a database worth of emotions, of different experiences in different environments and different sensations. So going into the cold water for the very first time is a new sensation. So what does the brain do with a new sensation that it's never experienced before? Well, the limbic system, full of its database worth of emotions, would look in its database like a librarian would look in its library to find the perfect book or the ideal book that would reflect that sensation. And if it can't find that sensation, then the limbic librarian will have to go further into the paralimbic system. And it too will look for an emotion to then attach that to, like a symbol of an emotion. So in the paralimbic system, the nearest thing that it will find is some sort of memory or some sort of registered emotion to what ice cold water is. And that is usually this unmitigated fear and panic. So that sends that message back up to the limbic system. Limbic system then regards this as, okay, yes, I know what unmitigated fear and panic is, and in comes the shock response. Now that will happen regardless anyway, but in a person who has managed to tune themselves into this limbic system, this awareness, this controlling of your fear, then they will be able to not override it, but be able to register it and keep themselves calm through visualization techniques or through breathing techniques. Remember, this is all happening within a millisecond. So that really is a lot of neurons that are being fired up and down through the pathways to register what is actually going on through these sensations and emotions. Now, in breathwork, we see this a lot, where we will take a beginner through a routine, through several weeks or months of breathwork each week. And actually what will happen is they'll develop a longer tolerance to holding their breath. So again, what's happening there? Why is that all of a sudden different? What's physiologically happening in the body or in the brain that allows us to last longer in our breath holds? Much the same as if you took a beginner into an ice cold bath. 3 weeks from now, if you were to continue with that, they'll have a better tolerance with the cold, with the ice. So again, this is the neuro-symbolization, the neural symbols. If we were to pre-program ourselves into a happy state, a joyful state, smiling, singing, humming, creating this bliss and this awareness, before we then put ourselves into that environment, we can then change that symbol or create a new symbol, which the limbic librarian and the paralimbic would then recognize as cold water doesn't equal fear and panic, breath holding doesn't equal fear and panic, but it equals something different. It equals joy, equals happiness, blissfulness. Now, don't get me wrong, if you were to stay in the cold water for too long, yes, of course, that is dangerous. That's hypothermia. If you were to hold your breath for too long, yes, of course, you could pass out. So at some point, there has to be that cut-off switch that then says, okay, we have had a positive stress response, and the sympathetic nervous system has been activated, but now it's calm. If we leave it too long, we'll get another sympathetic nervous system response, and then that message might then change, and we create a new symbolization in the limbic system, which would then maybe get us back into that fear response again. So just a really interesting subject, and explain a little bit about what happens when we do breath holding, and what happens when you also do a stress or a fear environment like the cold water. Now, lastly, just relate this to everyday life. If you are doing a video on YouTube for the first time, what is the same response? Again, it could be fear, it could be panic. If you are turning up for a job interview that you've never done before without any preparation, that could be then perceived as being a threat, and again, the fear response is exactly the same. So in breathwork and various other types of taming the fear, this is what the ultimate goal is to try and override that and create these new pathways and symbolizations. So just worth noting. Let me know how you get on with your ice cold baths and with your breath holding and kumbhaka. And thanks for listening, and I'll see you again next time.